Welcome back to Shredder's Not Dead. If it makes you bang your head, we'll talk with them more about them. And I'm very pleased to say I'm joined by Robin from The Ocean today. Got to
Hey
admit
man,
straight up, I'm a huge fan. This is pretty exciting to have you on. I've been looking forward to this one for a while. So how you doing?
pretty good. I'm in Spain at the moment, recovering from our record release party in Palma de Mallorca last Friday. So I'm very good.
Yeah, excellent. I imagine with a record that good, the release party must have been something as well.
It was just a private gathering, really. But yeah, no, we decided not to do anything official this time around. We're going to tour in September, October again. But we all really wanted to have a bit of a time off touring and seeing each other for a while after we got home from the Carnival tour in February. So yeah, we played 155 shows last year. So now is like the time when everyone's just doing their own thing. And that's good.
Yeah, exactly. And before we get into the technical details of the album and all that, I do have to ask, how's Loic's legs?
Oh, he's doing very well. He's been on well, like he broke them in March last year. He's been on crutches still in June when we were touring with Psychonaut and PG Lost, and then during the summer he was kind of like back up on his feet, but still, taking it slow. But ever since then, he's been fully back to normal, fully recovered.
Yeah, excellent. And I have to say, as someone who's seen you guys multiple times and seen the antics that Loic likes to get up to, Ari crowd surfing like he does was the attitude in the band a little bit of like, I can't believe this didn't happen sooner, or
In a way, yes, but ironically, it didn't happen that way, like as most people thought. It's not that he went into the crowd during a show and just like popped on the floor. Like it happened like long after the end of the show while packing down lights. It was just a very unfortunate thing that could have happened to anyone, anytime.
oh,
So, which is also why I don't think he has learned his lesson from it. Like, he was still going out on the last tour. So I think yeah, I think it's just been like an unlucky accident, really, Could have happened
yeah.
to anyone.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear
Yeah.
that. I'm not surprised the rumor that went around about it
It
being
is
a
quite
stage dive
critical, though,
thing,
that
but
it never happened during a gig before. Like, I've seen him
yeah.
jump off things that are like way too high for people to jump off. And he always got away with it. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, on to Holocene. It's an amazing record. It's still very much the Ocean record, but I think the big talking point to come out of it is the synth heaviness of it. And if that's a side of the Ocean that people listening now really like, you're going to love this one. It's still really crushing. But just wondering, was there always going to be a shift for this new record towards a more, shall we say, ambient, like to push the ambient stuff more towards the front, or was that just the natural sound for where you wanted the themes of the albums to go?
I think it's something that just happened. Like, this album is different in many ways. And that's already starting with the writing process. So, it all started during mid-lockdown in the fall of 2020 when Peter, our synth guy, started sending me ideas. And in the beginning, I wasn't even sure if that was Ocean stuff. It was just something that I liked, that inspired me. So I started adding guitars and drums over it. And then we were bouncing ideas back and forth for a while. And at the end of that process was this record. And then, like, when we went back to listen to it, we were like, oh yeah, this is absolutely an Ocean record, but it wasn't really planned in a way that we were setting out to write a new album. It was just, us fooling around with stuff. And I think that was good because it took a bit of the pressure away and just made us really get in the zone without any strings attached. And that was a good thing in the end. So it's different in a way that it's the only Ocean record so far that didn't start with me writing riffs and sitting down with my guitar, but that I was actually working with things that somebody else had already kind of developed to a point of not much detail, structure, and arrangement wise. It was usually just like 2 parts per song, sometimes 3 parts per song, but developed to a great level of detail concerning sound and production already, because this is how Peter is working. Like, he's very much focused on already having everything sound like it's going to sound in its final studio sound, basically. Well, I'm more of a I have more of a punk rock approach, like I can record a riff with guitar rig and I can imagine how it's going to sound later. So it's been a different approach to writing altogether. And Peter's role in the band has kind of changed a lot over the course of the past 4 or 5 years. He was previously our lighting guy for 4 years, and then he only joined the band in 2018 for Phanerozoic 1. And on that record, he's already playing on every track, but it's mostly things that are more in the background that are kind of like fattening the guitar sounds and not so much lead stuff. And I think it just took him some time to find his place in the band, and also for us to find that place for him somehow. And now he's like, no, it's very clear, and that's why this record is more daring on the synths end and on the electronics end, and it's become more of like a prime instrument for us to work with, to compose around, to even start a song with. Like on this record, almost every track is like initially based on synth ideas. So a lot has changed, and it's just been a not like a conscious process, but just like an evolution that happened within the band, and Holocene is a result of that evolution.
And I think it fits really well the way that the arc of the Phanerozoic albums went, and then into this sort of bookend album in terms of the epochs of time. But I think the thing that really intrigued me listening to it is how well this the shift in songwriting came across. And now that we're talking about it, I can really hear exactly what you're saying, where this new record almost sounds like someone has taken an existing electronica record, thinking of some of the classics like by Justice, that sort of thing, and have fit, as you would say, like a punk or a metal elements over the top. And it's a big change from where this album started. But I suppose lyrically, did this work? This feels like it worked really quite naturally for where this album was always going to go. Is that fair to say, do you think?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, there's like if you look at what we're listening to privately within the band, we're all listening to a lot of electronic music, both contemporary as well as old stuff. We're all huge fans of Massive Attack, Mezzanine, and early 2000s trip hop and things like that. So we listen to a lot of that stuff in the band. So for us, it's not a far stretch at all. And we've always been talking about like making a record that kind of like takes some of those elements and puts them into the context of contemporary heavy music. And so it's been something we've been excited about for a while, but there was no conscious decision to make a record like this now. That just happened when Peter started sending me ideas. But I guess that is an expression of where we are, personally, what we listen to. And for us, this always made a lot of sense. And in that way, it's just a very natural type of evolution that happened. I do have to say, though, that it's not necessarily a direction for things to come. There is a second record that's also already written that we haven't recorded yet, but it was written around the same time as Holocene, and that is focused more on riffs, I would say. Like it's maybe continuing more along the lines of the first half of Phanerozoic 2, while Holocene is connecting better with the second half of Phanerozoic 2, I would say. So there is another record in the making, and that is a bit less electronic again. So it's not necessarily a direction for things to come. We just like to challenge ourselves with every record and not repeat the same old formula, and just try something else and set different paradigms for that specific record that we're working on. And then we might completely overhaul that with the next one, and do something else. But that's what's just essentially very important for keeping it interesting for us. And if we don't manage to keep it interesting for us, then we're going to break up as a band, so that's very important. And that's why our listeners just have to bear with us on that end.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I have to say, I mean, I'm still trying to digest what I've just heard with Holocene, but I'm absolutely thrilled to hear there's another one not too long on the way. And
I didn't say that. It might be long on the way because we haven't started recording it yet, and we're very quick with writing. But when it comes to recording and like production and mix and artwork, that's what really takes time. So Holocene was written within the course of 2 weeks, but the process of finalizing it took 2.5 years, basically. And unfortunately, it's like that. Yeah, if we had permanent setup where we could just throw out ideas permanently, we would be as productive as King Gizzard, I believe.
Yeah, yep. Man, they've come out with an absolute belter of a doom metal track this week, haven't they?
Yeah.
Oh, just a
such a
different
great
attitude,
band.
though. I mean, I listen to The Ocean, and I think just landscapes and scenery, and I love about bands like King Gizzard that they'll throw anything at the wall, and it's really interesting to see what they come out with, and they just move on from it and put it aside. But I think the longevity of what you guys do is really impressive. Got excited about King Gizzard and lost my train of thought here. Riffs.
That KG record is a really good album. Like I really got into that big time when it came out.
Yeah, the microtonal stuff as well really fascinates me.
Yeah.
The way that I think they've been pretty open about it before, that they like to have a gimmick. And I think Stu's come out and said every year he tried to learn a new instrument for the start phase of the band. And at a certain point, he sort of ran out of things to pick up and learn that were quirky or people hadn't heard before. So we started microtonal guitar, and he's done other things since then. And it's interesting that it's a gimmick, but they do creative things with it despite it being that way,
I think it's a lot more than that. Like I've been listening to a lot of traditional Anatolian music and know it from there. And the way they employ it in their songs is actually very nifty. And like I don't think it's only a gimmick, or maybe it's gone past that stage now. I actually have my own microtuned guitar, which my guitar builder Michel from Moza Guitars in the Netherlands just completed. I have it at home now, and I'm struggling to find my way around on the instrument, and it's very challenging. It's but it's also it also might be opening up new doors for us. I mean, I've always been a lot into Oriental and Anatolian music and Arab music, and there's so much cool shit going on there, which is challenging for our European listening habits. But I've always been intrigued by that whole realm, so I'm gonna try to cope with that microtonal guitar now.
Well, I'd love to hear that. I think is it right to say that even across this Phanerozoic and now Holocene, there's been moments where you've sort of dabbled a little bit in microtonality, or at least have not been afraid of being a bit out of tune in a very artistic way, I should.
Yeah. I mean, there is like these kind of like, let's just call them like Oriental influences on that album, but already on some previous records of ours as well. That's because, like I said, I've always felt drawn towards that world, but it's all played with real guitars and just like bending to, get the slightly out of tune vibes. And if you just have one string that is perfectly like that quarter note, out of tune, you can do different things with it. So it's opening up a lot of new possibilities of doing things. And I'm excited to start looking at that actually.
Yeah, exactly. I think the riff that comes to mind off this latest record is Parabiosis, has where the quite heavy section comes in. There's a couple of bends where the chords are changing and that chugging happens, where it's very obvious you're just sort of letting it hang out a bit. And it sounds so crushing and just disorienting, and I love it.
Yeah, that's cool shit you can do with intentionally playing certain notes out of tune while the rest of the strings is perfectly in tune.
The other thing that sort of came to mind listening through it is that people who liked, say, the enslaved side of the black metal era might be quite a big fan of what you guys have done here. I felt that the riffs were obviously quite crushing. Atlantic comes to mind. Incredible riff. That is just like devastating. But it doesn't have that traditional role of it that it might have if you were writing in a more traditional rock and roll sense. It almost becomes a dissociative a little bit, in that you've got this very rich, spacious landscape of music going on, and this riff cuts through it in a way that it's almost, it puts you somewhere delirious rather than makes you want to mosh, but it also does that. Sorry, I'm waxing lyrical about this record a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
Just am I on a bit of a wavelength with you with how that came about?
Yeah, it's an interesting way of looking at it. I think to really fully feel the impact of that part, you have to listen to not just the track Atlantic, but like the first three tracks that lead up to it. It's kind of like I think the dynamics of that record are greater than the sum of its parts, you know, and that's why it was so difficult to pick singles as well, because not one single is representative of this album as a whole. So like when we started thinking about songs to premiere, we're always like, oh, but this doesn't give you the full picture of what this is all about, you know. And at one point we just embraced that, and we were like, okay, we're going to confuse people with these singles, but you know, let's just embrace that and deal with it. And yeah, I think that part, when that riff comes in, it's about 20 minutes into the record. Like the reason why it hits so heavy is because of everything that happened before, not just within the track, but like also the three previous tracks. It was a very difficult track to mix, and specifically this part, because it's a single note riff, quite low tuned, but it's still just single notes. And even like when we doubled it twice, so we had like 4 guitars playing it, it still has that single note feel. And at the same time, the part before, which doesn't have any heavy guitars in it, is extremely orchestral. There's like a lot of brass going on, a lot of like very heavy low frequencies from the lower ranges of trombone and even tubes and things like that. So it like for quite some time, it felt like the track is plunging into a hole there when the guitars come in, when it should be the moment when it's just like the heaviest part of the song. So we had to kind of like thin out the section before quite significantly in order to have that part be impactful. And that was a bit challenging to get right, but that's always the case when you have very multi-layered tracks like this one. There's like a lot going on. It starts very minimal, but then it's just layering and stacking of layer after layer, layer upon layer. And sometimes you just overdo it and you get to the point where you're like, okay, I don't have the means here to add more to it. That means I need to thin out what's already happened before. And that was like a classic example for that moment during the mix. And then you find yourself discarding ideas and just like things you've recorded that sound super great. And you're like, I'm sorry, but this has to go because it's, it's taking from the impact of the next part in the track. So that's an interesting, sometimes a bit frustrating part of producing more than writing, really, because on the writing end, a lot of times you don't have all these things in your head when you think about them. So you need to actually start fleshing out the ideas in their final sound in order to be able to understand that. So, and that affects the writing because you go back to that process and you essentially cut out things that you were sure about were great, so it's a very interesting process.
Yeah, it's a dark art when it comes to things like volume and terrace dynamics and the way that it contrasts with everything that's around it. You can look at a riff by Jimmy Page, and in the context of one bass guitar and one drum, it sounds gigantic. Put the right fuzz pedal on it, whatever, it'll blow you away. Yeah. But if you put that in the middle of an orchestral part, it would suddenly sound like nothing because you've just got this massive, huge wall sound to compare it to, and suddenly you realize it's not actually in that context as big as you thought it was outside of it.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
Yeah, and one of the other things I wanted to touch on a little bit that I've been really curious about when it comes to the ocean in general is on this latest record in particular, you touch on a couple of things about our attitudes towards its death and some of the moral quandaries around medicine and the way that technology and all that's advancing. And obviously, there's always been this contrast between scientific and between personal, between the big picture of human history and day-to-day sorts of things that go on lyrically. And of course, sometimes being too explicit about meanings ruins the magic of it. So I'm not asking you to do that, but I'm curious to know how you pair things together when it comes to knowing that, okay, this particular song that represents a particular epoch or a particular layer of the ocean or does it match with a particular theme? Is that something that takes a lot of thought, or do you just let it happen and as it goes?
In this case, on this record, we kind of just let it happen. It's in a way the least conceptual record lyrically, in that every track has its own agenda and its own topic. And like we use the Holocene theme as kind of like synonymous for the modern, or more like the postmodern age, really. So all the songs on that album deal with very recent things we experienced during this weird time of the pandemic when the record was written mostly. And in a way that the fact that there's like a different kind of like thread or different topic for every track also represents the postmodern multitude of opinions, perspectives, and ideologies, basically. So it kind of makes sense from that angle as well. But we really went song by song here. So like the way we usually compose vocals and then lyrics is that after the instrumental part of the music is completely done, Loic and me meet up and we start just fooling around with parts. And that happens not in a chronological order, or like even, we can start with track 7 of the record and then go to back track 3. So we're jumping back and forth depending on how we feel inspired. And sometimes Loic has ideas, sometimes I have ideas. And this all happens completely without lyrics. So he's just standing in his vocal booth, improvising and singing melodies and vocal lines in something that is half English, half French, half Dada. And when that is done and we agree on like a certain idea, that's the moment when I start writing lyrics. So then I write lyrics over the melodic arches that he wrote, basically the lines, and write something that fits in terms of phrasing, in terms of sound, because a lot of times, even if you sing a vowel that is like an A, and it sounds very different from finishing a word on an O, so like it's a lot of things you have to take into account basically when writing lyrics. And that's why it's one of the most complicated things for me and one of the least intuitive. It's really mathematics. You have to pay attention to rhythm and rhyme and melody and even vocal sounds, and come up with something that still works. And that's always like a huge challenge. So so that's how we do this. And on this record particularly, we were really going track by track and kind of wanted every track to stand on its own and deal with its own topic.
Obviously, the Ocean at a certain point, as the Ocean Collective, and now I think you sort of dropped that label, but you've had a significant amount of members and collaborators over the years. And I'm wondering about the impact that sort of diversity of musical and artistic influence has had on you guys, and if how you find it's changed as the lineup's more sort of stabilized today. But obviously, people find new music all the time as well. So it's not like any one individual has static influences for their entire life.
Yeah. Well, we still use the term collective to refer to all the people that are still a part of our group that are not on stage with us, So like there's like the live crew, there's the people who do our videos and our artwork that are very important for what we do as artists. Like with Martin Quamme and Stefan Alt, we've been working for over a year on the packaging and the album art. For me, that's almost equally important as the music, to find something really unique and groundbreaking there. And so these people, you will never see them on stage to us, but they're very important for what we do. So we refer to these as still being part of the larger Ocean Collective. And so we still use that actually. But the band lineup has consolidated already years ago. I think the last person that joined from the current lineup was David, and he joined in 2016. So for 7 years, we've been playing with the exact same people. And already before that, for the past 10 years, we've been playing with mostly 80% the same people. So I think that has changed the band massively, because we all know each other a lot better now, both as musicians as well as individuals. We all want the same thing, which is very important, which makes us strong, and which also makes us be able to find like ways to go about the usual difficulties that you run into when you spend half of the year together sitting in a nutshell van or bus, and need to find your and develop your strategies of dealing with each other and learning when it's time to take a step back in order to not start hating each other, which would be the end of the band. And everybody knows that. And nobody wants that, because we all love what we do. And we're very appreciative of this privilege that this band is, which allows us to travel and get paid for playing shows in Australia, for example, which is fucking great. So at the end of the day, it's important to remind yourself of that when you're tired and you're running into these petty day-to-day things. And I think we've managed to do that very well. For a long time, I've had a really hard time with Loic and him with me, just getting along. And now, we've put that behind us and we're just really good friends and managed to work it out. And I think that's probably the greatest struggle of being in a band, is to be able to deal with one another. It's like that, and once you've overcome that and you have a steady lineup and everybody knows their limits and everybody is genuinely appreciative of everyone else in the band, then you become invincible. And I feel that that's kind of what we've become already, like a couple of years ago. We're all very sure that this is what we want to do with our lives for the foreseeable future. And right now, when we're taking a break for half a year, that's also very important, to give yourself space to just not see each other. I haven't seen the rest of my bandmates in 3 months now, and it's great, and I'm looking forward to going out on tour again and at the end of July, when we're going to start rehearsing. It's going to be awesome. Everyone's going to be fresh and looking forward to it. But it's very important to also have these decisive, conscious breaks, and so in many ways, I think we just figured out the right approach to how to do this, and that's what keeps us strong.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's quite a wise attitude you've got towards it there. You've also got a fair bit on your hands with Pelagic Records. Am I right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Well, big congratulations on the new Herod release that's come out of that label. I have to say that, as well as what the Ocean have been doing, was particularly blown me away. But just in general, having such a solid label with such a great lineup of bands, it's you've got a fair bit of music on your plate from the sounds of it.
Yeah, man, there's a lot of exciting stuff coming out this year. We also just released the new Low record, whom you might be familiar with. Great band from Sydney. And we have a record by The Gorge coming out of St. Louis in the States called Mechanical Fiction. That's a brilliant record to check out for sure. Coming out later in June. And we pretty much have 2 releases per month coming up for the next, until the end of the year. We have a vinyl subscription that allows you to get everything we release on vinyl for a flat rate every month. So that's why we keep our releases very steady at 2 releases per month, because that's kind of what our subscribers expect. And it's become a very solid and very time-consuming operation, which sometimes is hard for me to keep up with when I'm touring and I have to do the label work on the side. But there's always a couple of hours when you're sitting in the bus, and you will always find me working on my laptop then for Pelagic. And Paul as well. Like Paul, Ocean drummer, also works for Pelagic, so we're both very involved.
Yeah, very good. Well, I'll let you get back to your break there. Thank you very much for your time and chatting to us. And I know there's plenty of us over here in Australia who are very keen to hear some of these new tracks and Phanerozoic 2 tracks live as well. Sort of got robbed of that because of COVID, but so did plenty of the other parts of the world. Hey,
exactly. Yeah, we haven't played Phanerozoic 2 in Australia yet, so those tracks already feel old for us because we played 155 shows last year and we've been playing Jurassic Cretaceous as the closing track every single night. So by the time we got home from our European tour with Carnival, we were just like, fuck, it's time for something new now, So it already feels like we've played them too long, but it's always been fun. And if we do come back to Australia, which we hopefully will next year, then we're definitely going to play some Phanerozoic 2 tracks for sure.
Excellent. I'll look forward to it. Robin, thank you very much for joining us, and I'll see you when I see you.
All right, man. Take care. Thanks for your time.